healing not just from a psychological standpoint, but we're healing from a soulful and spiritual standpoint. Because what I would say is for many men, the challenges that we hear that men are facing today, and many men are suffering in silence, is a lot of men are in spiritual crisis. And where when I go into many different faith traditions, I see a majority of women, especially in churches, and I don't see as many men. And I actually had a conversation with Marianne Williamson once, and I was at one of her experiences at my church in New York, and I went up to her when she was speaking at my seminary, and I said, so I noticed it was about 85% women and about 15% men in your audience. I said, where do men go for spiritual growth?
Hey everyone, it's Amy Lynn Durham, and you're listening to Create Magic at Work. Create Magic at Work is on a mission to equip senior leaders with tools they need to be a true quantum leader and actually understand what that means. Improve employee engagement, retain top talent, and transform your workplace culture to have less drama and stress. So let's start making magic. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Create Magic at Work. We are in season 5, and I just finished being a co-guest with this guest coming up, Sean Harvey, on another podcast with Hummingbird Humanity. And I basically finished that conversation and said, Sean, I need you to be a guest on the Create Magic at Work podcast and share your message and wisdom with the magic listeners. So Sean has graciously accepted. Let me share a little bit about Sean with everybody before we get into it. He is the Chief Compassion Officer and founder of the Warrior Compassion Men's Studio. His work in personal, organizational, and societal transformation is inspired by 25 years of organization development consulting, combined with his past and current academic affiliations at Cornell University, New York University, Baruch College, and George Washington University. In 2021, Sean received the Saul A. Silverman Award for Conflict Resolution and Healing from the International Organization Development Association for his healing work with men in hyper-masculine systems. This is why Sean's on today. As an interfaith minister, he co-founded Project Compassion, a national initiative to deepen compassion in police departments. Sean is also a TEDx speaker with his talk, Compassion Makes the Warrior. His website, we'll just say it right now, is warriorcompassion.com, and we'll have all that in the show notes later on. So Sean, welcome to Create Magic at Work.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I really want to note for everyone listening, this was a really unique experience on how Sean and I connected. Brian McCormick, who is a former guest on the Create Magic at Work podcast, you can go back and listen to his episode, which was really informative, introduced Sean and I. And we hopped on Zoom because we were going to be on Brian's show. And we started talking, and we discovered that we had some mutual connections. One being Dr. Judy Neal, who was my mentor this year with the Edgewalker program. And then, Sean, you worked with Dr. Judy in the past when you worked for Eileen Fisher. And I wanted you to share a little bit about your past position at Eileen Fisher and maybe a little bit about the work or the article that you did with Dr. Judy and about spirituality in the workplace. You could kind of elaborate on those things.
Sure. I worked for Eileen Fisher for 5 years. I left career consulting on Wall Street and as a college professor. And on my 40th birthday, I gave it all up. And within 2 weeks was interviewing with Eileen Fisher, the fashion company. I started out as the internal change agent for creative and ultimately became the head of personal transformation and well-being for the company. In that time, it was an amazing role, and we took our employees and our leaders through powerful work around the Enneagram, ego relaxation, limiting beliefs, shadow work, went through around somatic work, contemplative practices, and spirituality and mindfulness.
So let me just interject right there that when was this?
This was probably about 7 or 8 years ago.
So I highlight that because I want everybody listening to hear how amazing that is, that this company, this fashion company, Eileen Fisher, was helping their teams with shadow work, with recognizing the ego and how to maybe not have it in the driver's seat as much, and also helping with mindset, with limiting beliefs. So to me, that feels really cutting edge that you were doing that 8 years ago within an organization, and that organization was allowing that, and were they embracing it? Like, what was the
They were.
environment when you were doing that?
No, they were embracing it. It was something that Eileen, she is a person, that
Mm-hmm.
Eileen believed full heartedly in, that if we focus on the personal transformation and growth of our employees, they will be better performers. And so it was really doing more of the inner work,
Mm-hmm.
and moving beyond a lot of the superficial leadership work that we often see in organizations to a much deeper dive around where's the shadow, where's the ego, where's the wounding, and where's the potential for healing, for integration, and coming into our best selves.
Yeah. So what were some of the results that you saw from approaching things that way?
The first was, one, doing this, it wasn't your typical or traditional leadership development or professional development experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so employees and leaders were discovering things about themselves they couldn't even imagine in the workplace. They were having conversations in a safe way, but looking at themselves through a different lens. And they were finding these moments and these epiphanies of liberation, of really helping themselves come into a better version of themselves, and to really walk into their essence versus staying in their shadow, and
Mm-hmm.
having an understanding of those distinctions.
Hmm.
We,
And I would say, I would add to that, let me know if this is accurate, that due to that leadership development,
hmm,
the company had more engaged employees and did better versus what you called training, or developing others with superficial leadership
hmm.
type trainings. Can you explain to us what you feel superficial leadership type trainings are or development things are?
Hmm.
Just as some
That's,
examples.
hmm. Yeah, from now I've been doing leadership development work for a few decades,
Mm-hmm.
and also was a college professor teaching leadership management. And there's something about where we won't go, what we
Mm.
feel is off limits, and we stay conscious, we stay aware of the leadership practices, but we're really staying at that behavior change level. We're staying at the head. And I think the distinction is when you
Mm.
start to allow for a different level of visceral experience of your emotions. I think oftentimes we intellectualize our emotions, especially still in leadership, because that's
Mm-hmm.
where it's safe. But to go to the place of true vulnerability and be able to experience our emotions in a different way, experience our stories in a different way, and discover our truth in a different way. This is what becomes powerful when we think about how to show up as leaders, in terms of how do we engage teams, how do we build bridges, and how do we bring deeper humanity into our organizational systems.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it gives a permission to go places that are deeper, both in our own development and our team dynamics and the ways that we think about and view our organizational systems,
Mm-hmm.
by being able to do this work on a deeper level.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
So, what led you to transition, or how did it happen on your journey where now you are working with men? You work with men
Right.
and you help, I mean, correct all my verbiage if I'm wrong, but you help with hyper masculinity.
Mhm.
You help with that. And when I look at that from my lens, I say, oh, this is great because we are working in systems that might be a little toxic from hyper masculinity, especially in the corporate space. I think there's been an invitation for some more healthy feminine type energy to come in and balance that out. So what is that work about? And a little bit more about what led you to that work.
So I'll start there.
Mm-hmm.
There were probably two or three touch points that led me there. First, Eileen Fisher was built on feminine leadership and a feminine energy in its own business model. And it was performing at a high level in terms of from a revenue perspective, from an employee engagement perspective, from an employee retention perspective, and a quality of life perspective. It was hitting all the marks. It was rated as the best company to work for 11 years in a row for mid-sized organizations. And when I arrived, so there are a couple points in my own story. My first day on the job after an 8-month interview process, my two bosses sat me down and they said, Sean, we want to just acknowledge that you have proven yourself in the interview process. We now want you to stop proving yourself and learn how to be who you actually are. When you interviewed with us, you showed us your heart and you showed us your polish. We hired you for your heart and we want to see less of your polish. We want to
Wow.
see you unfiltered. So that was the first of like, whoa, okay, who says this?
What a gift, right? In the corporate space for a
Right?
mentor to tell you that. Amazing. Yeah.
And then second, I was sent to an artist commune in Canada for 5 months to learn how to incorporate the arts into creative facilitation. And it was there that I realized, sort of through a visualization experience on that first Sunday morning, that this is my work. My work was to work with men. And in doing so, I had also started noticing how men were being transformed in the organization. And so what I would hear when I talk to men is I would say, hey, I feel like I'm changing. Are you changing? What are you noticing? And they would say, well, my wife said, and we usually started with my wife said or my girlfriend said, started to listen differently. I started to be more patient. I no longer needed to be right all the time. And I learned to start being more curious. I started to have more access to my emotional expression and I started to tap into my creativity differently. And I was solving problems in a more creative way. But the big push was what I noticed. Men would say, I feel more comfortable in my own skin. And the culture's allowing me. And I think that's that point of liberation.
Mm-hmm.
So these combination of going to the artist commune, seeing men's stories, I just knew that I needed to be able to do this work.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next piece is going back to your mention of Dr. Judy Neal.
Mm-hmm.
We had actually co-authored an article called "Nurturing the Soul of the Company" at Eileen Fisher, and we
Mm-hmm.
were looking at what does workplace spirituality look like, and what does workplace spirituality look like at Eileen Fisher. And one of the points that stood out to me, you have to imagine Eileen created a company that started at $350 and turned into a $450 million a year business. And
It's
when people
incredible.
ask what is the soul of the company, and employees would say Eileen,
Mm-hmm.
and they would say Eileen values the deep intuitive knowing more than empirical based data.
Mm.
She wasn't looking for us to quantify. She would follow her deeper intuition in the ways she would make decisions, and that led to a culture that was simple in design, that focused on generosity and compassion, that was organic in nature, and really spurred creativity.
Mm-hmm.
And all the while keeping a highly engaged workforce with a very strong culture of generosity.
Yeah. I mean, I learned from Dr. Judy the skill of an edgewalker of sensing the future. There's three components. One is data collection from the past. The second is that intuitive knowing that you're speaking about, or what some people even call a gut instinct, right? Following that. And then the
Mhm.
third is that creative, positive visualization. And it
Mhm.
sounds like when we talk about the souls of companies and organizations, a lot of times I think that second piece is missing in these hyper masculine environments, which is the intuition, that
Right.
intuitive knowing, the gut instinct, the creative positive visualization. Maybe that's in a lot of leadership. Definitely data collection from the past, right? I mean, that's heavily used. So I love that you highlight that middle piece as a very strong component for cultivating compassion and all of the things that help a workplace thrive. I'm
But I,
curious to get into. Oh, go ahead, Sean.
what I would say though to the first point is there's a distinction when we look at the past from looking at the data versus understanding the stories. And I think that the art of storytelling and understanding our past, that was very prevalent in Eileen Fisher. The stories of Eileen Fisher, the milestones, the symbolism of it. Those I think are aspects that create and strengthen an organizational's culture. I think because that helps to create that visceral connection versus that intellectual connection.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Thank you for putting that in. I love everything about what you just said. Storytelling's huge right now. Everyone's talking about it. I think it
Mhm.
needs to be done in the right way and
Right.
utilized in a way that connects each other, where we see the humanity in each other. So thanks for sharing that. I want to dive into how you work with men today.
Mhm.
And I want to hear about your work and how you're doing it and share that a little bit, because I know you work with police, like I mentioned in your bio. And you also do some work, correct me if I'm wrong, with white supremacists
Mhm.
in helping them cultivate compassion.
Mhm.
And I'm curious how these individuals step into this work. How do you find these individuals that want to do the work? Um, is it like a remedial thing that the company's paying for? I'm just curious about all the, how do you, who are your clients? What's the avatar? Are they invited to step into the work? Do they want to change? What does that look like? Maybe you can story tell a little bit for us.
So I think we're gonna go. This is where we go to the magic. I think the magic is I don't seek any of this out. I don't go out saying this is who I want to work with. What I find is this is who is attracted to me.
Mm-hmm.
So men, organizations that have deep trauma,
Mm-hmm.
men who possess hypermasculine mindsets or are in hypermasculine systems. I think there is a yearning that my energy creates an invitation.
Mm-hmm.
So I find that the more I walk this spiritual path, the more where I am meant to serve finds me versus me finding it. And I just have an openness, and I think I've done the work to move from one scarcity to abundance and receiving versus seeking. And so I think those are big distinctions in this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just give you an example. In the last 3 weeks since finishing my book,
Mm-hmm.
I'm now working in human trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
And I have just been asked to work with prison inmates in Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
I've just found an organization that works with recovering hate group extremists. And these are becoming more of, I think, the web of
Mm-hmm.
where I work. And then I also am working in finance with foreign banks, and I'm working with insurance companies. And so I really am going to environments that are traditionally masculine,
Mm-hmm.
and the yearning is for compassion. The yearning is for when I talk about the work of spirituality in the workplace. I really translated to it's just the concepts of love, compassion, and deeper humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And that we're bringing deeper humanity into these organizational systems and into these communities and into these mindsets. And so the work, what it translates into is facilitating spaces in the emergent, in the unknown, and building bridges. I find that what I do more often than not is I'm building bridges in community. I'm helping groups of individuals move from individual consciousness to collective wisdom to solve problems and solve challenges and division from a different perspective that is
Mhm.
coming from a place of higher consciousness.
So I want to go back a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so can you describe for us
Mhm.
what are some characteristics of a hyper masculine workplace or environment that what would you say are some characteristics for that?
I would say it's typically male dominated. There is not a lot of room for emotion. There's not a lot of room for compassion. Compassion is still seen as a weakness. It's not seen as a strength or essential. It holds a value of more of the data, holds more of the value of the hard skills versus the softer skills, and doesn't necessarily create the environments that are truly inclusive of all voices.
Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a really great framing of that. So, in an environment like that, what is the downside to being in a hyper masculine environment? I mean, I know you said the characteristics, but like,
Right.
why
What's the
is it
downside?
not that great to be in an environment that doesn't have emotion or cherish compassion?
So the Surgeon General just came out with a report that we, as a nation, are experiencing an epidemic of loneliness.
Mm,
And I think first and foremost, hypermasculine systems do not allow for deeper connection with ourselves, with others, with our truth.
mm-hmm.
So I think that's first and foremost. I think another cost is, or another challenge of hypermasculine systems, besides the deep connection, is that the systems are often focused on fairness, but don't take into account the individuality of what people need to meet them where they are. It's often a one size fits all approach. And quite honestly, these systems were built by men. They support and give preference to men and haven't been built to really elevate and hold the voices of women and perspectives of women.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the biggest challenges that we're experiencing as we talk about this work is for men who, two things are happening when we start to, the world, as I've been told, as the world continues to feminize, we elevate the feminine as we talk about these things like empathy and compassion and community and deeper connection. And the question is, how do we do this in a way without emasculating men in the process? And I think the two things are often ignited these days, which is as the rules and roles and norms around masculinity, manhood, gender, power dynamics, and even the ways we lead are challenging men to look at things differently. And when it's men, much of this is so deeply ingrained for men in particular that it's asking them to change the way they think about their own identity. And then the other part is there's such little room for the feminine that it's a scary proposition to say, let's tap into it. And what I often say is, it is only through the feminine that we can heal and strengthen the masculine. So we can come into our integrated selves, we can come into our whole selves, and we can have the versatility that we need as men to be able to navigate a world that is becoming more chaotic, more complex, with more challenges that require us to have a different level of agility and a different level of adaptability to be able to navigate the world in a healthy way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like taking the hyper, it's just like removing the hyper out of it,
Right.
right?
Right.
Just and just like marrying the two in a beautiful, balanced way. and in what maybe someone's carrying within that energy that they're carrying within themselves.
And I think what gave me a sense of the path that I was on was going from the hyper-masculine environment of Wall Street to the hyper-feminine environment of Eileen Fisher, and saying neither of these is the ideal. But what if we took the best of the masculine and the best of the feminine and created something that's more integrated? And ultimately, you can challenge this because it's still in a binary. But flip side of it is it's on a continuum that, when integrated, brings us into our fuller humanity. And isn't that ultimately what we all want? Is to be able to tap into our humanity in a richer way and to experience each other from a place of greater humanity?
I agree with you. And I'm thinking of, the leader listener that might be listening. And it's kind of like, well, what does that even mean? Tapping into humanity. Like, what does that do for me? Right. And so this is just coming to me right now. A lot of clients that I work with at times feel they're missing vitality in life. I think that can speak to that too, like bringing that vitality back. Like, I am enjoying being a human being, and I'm enjoying connecting with other people and learning about them and their stories. It's like the Dr. Angelis Arian, when did you stop being enchanted by stories? When did you stop singing?
Yep.
When did you stop all those things? When did you stop dancing? And so I would say that's part of what we're talking about with this whole
Right.
humanity thing.
Well, I
And
think it's okay.
no, go ahead, Sean.
I think it's right. I think when I talk about humanity, it's really reclaiming the parts of ourselves that we've rejected over the course of our lives through our conditioning.
Love it.
And
Yeah.
especially for men who have lost that, as you say, the connection to creativity, lost the connection to connection.
Mm-hmm.
We often have an intellectualized ideal of love, and yet, because of the limitations of how we feel, we may have an intellectualized versus a visceral experience of being able to experience love. And I would say, on that topic, many of us, when we're in our wounding, hold on to love from a place of love with conditions, because that's what we've been taught, and moving to a place of unconditional love. And
Mm-hmm.
these are the aspects that I think connect with our humanity. So yes, vitality I see as a part of our humanity that brings us into our wholeness, where we can experience so much more
Mm-hmm.
than some of the limitations or some of what comes with our constricted identities, the protective layers we've put on that we hold back from really expressing ourselves or even seeing ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we shove parts of us down because we're afraid of being judged or shamed or all of those things. And then we're not showing up as our full self. So then we're not feeling fully human. So then we don't feel vitality in life. And then it's like this snowball effect, right? I'm curious, with the men that you work with in these hyper masculine situations, what are what are some of the breakthroughs that you see, or the transformation, like what when they walk away from these experiences with you facilitating
Mm-hmm.
them with them, what does that look like when the hyper is removed?
Mm-hmm. The first thing I notice is, what I often hear is, oh, I didn't know that I could even have these conversations. I didn't know that I could express these thoughts or share so openly with a group of other men. That's first.
Mm-hmm.
Second, I think there's an intimacy that happens among men that men are not used to. And so being able to have that deep connection with other men and be able to share and express vulnerability and realize they're not alone, right? And then I would say the third piece is to actually look at some of the ways we're wounded and realize that's not our deficits. We are not broken, but we are wounded. And there's a big difference. It's a big difference. I think for a lot of men, the idea is we have to fix the problem versus heal the wound.
Mm,
They're two very different processes. Fix the problem is in the masculine, and heal the wound is in the feminine.
mm.
Then I think it's what opens up when you start to have those acknowledgments. Either bringing in to the vitality piece, bringing in a different level of play, different
Hmm.
level of seeing the world differently, being able to express emotionally in relationship, and seeing marriages become stronger because there's a different level of connection, seeing leaders perform better because they're able to create a different type of engagement with their employees, and being able to be better fathers, you know?
Just that the huge ripple effect there is amazing. I'm just so fascinated by your work. I'm like asking you all these.
Yeah, sure.
Next question,
Mm-hmm.
your book that's coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us the title and tell us if we grab a copy when it's going to be out, and what we'll take away from it. Maybe a takeaway that we can't live without.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So the title is Warrior Compassion:
Mm-hmm.
Unleashing the Healing Power of Men. It will come out in late September or early October, and you'll be able to get it off of Amazon. And what you'll walk away with, ultimately, men will learn how to love in a new way.
Wow.
And so it's really designed as, the flow to be able to expand our capacity as men, our ability to love. And what happens when we're able to love in a new way? How does that translate in the ways we lead? How does that translate in the ways we're in relationship? How does that translate in the ways we see our organizations? And how does that translate in the ways we show up in society? So again, going back to the ripple effect.
Mm-hmm.
But it's that journey. It's that journey to learn how to love in a new way. So the way it's broken down is, first, we unpack and understand our stories. Second, how do we ground so we're able to be anchored for the journey? How do we be in an inquiry in the journey? And how do we walk a soul healing path? So we are healing not just from a psychological standpoint, but we're healing from a soulful and spiritual standpoint. Because what I would say is, for many men, the challenges that we hear that men are facing today, and many men are suffering in silence, is a lot of men are in spiritual crisis. And where when I go into many different faith traditions, I see a majority of women, especially in churches, and I don't see as many men. And I actually had a conversation with Marianne Williamson once, and I was at one of her experiences at my church in New York, and
Mm-hmm.
I went up to her when she was speaking at my seminary, and I said, "So, so I noticed it was about 85% women and about 15% men in your audience." I said, "Where do men go for spiritual growth?" And she said, "Well, Sean, this is your calling, so this is your problem to figure out." Marianne Williamson. But what she said was, there are many men that will come up to me after I speak, and they'll say they can't hear the message through me. And so I think it's in what I find, and that's why I started creating men's soul adventures, where I take men out into outdoor adventures where we have deeper male bonding and soul connecting conversations. Uh, and there are a number of men who come to those events.
Mm-hmm.
And so I find that we don't have as many outlets for men to, what I call, experience and engage in practical spirituality for dudes. We
Mm-hmm.
either have very woo-woo or
Mm-hmm.
very rigid, but we don't really have just offering men space to be in an inquiry for them to explore their questions around, and what I often say is the philosophical, existential, or spiritual awakening conversations.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, or just the deeper sense of meaning for my life.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I love it. I'm gonna keep going. I know we're a little over on time. I have one more question before we go to pulling a card for everyone
Mhm.
listening and for you.
Okay.
If you could leave everyone with a tip or what you feel, something like a micro step, right? Because this can feel big for people at times. Like, how do we even do this? If you could leave us with a micro tip or a step, what would be something that you would consider is compassionate leadership?
I was going to, so where I thought you were taking the conversation, I was going to say, I think it's surrendering control. But where you took the conversation or where you took the question, I think it's activate curiosity. First and foremost is be curious. Be curious about someone else's experience. And when you find yourself agitated, or you find yourself impatient, or you find yourself lacking compassion, ask yourself what's going on within me that's creating this agitation. It has nothing to do with the person in front of you that's pissing you off. It's all about looking within to say, okay, what's being activated here? What's being activated with me? And that often is the starting place. And what is this person reflecting back to me that I need to look at?
Thank you.
That's often the starting place for the shadow.
Such a good starting place. Curiosity. I stay curious. I ask meaningful questions. That's going to remove us out of judgment, right? Like a little bit more and more with that practice. And yeah, what's this I have this emotional charge that's not of equal comparison to maybe what's going on here. So what's within me that this is coming up? Shadow.
Right.
Love it.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you, Sean. Okay, I'm going to pull a card for you and for everyone listening. It's a message meant for us from the universe today, no matter when you're listening to this. This hardly ever comes up. We got reward. You must be working hard, Sean. It must be because you finished your book.
Okay.
The affirmation is, I take time to reward myself for the work that I accomplish. So this is a call from the universe for everyone listening. If you haven't taken a pause to recognize how far you've come or to do something to reward yourself for the work that you've accomplished, the universe is saying, we're going to press the pause button here, and it's time to reward yourself for the work that you've accomplished. The question is really, I think I answered it for you, but I'm going to ask it for you. What are you proud of that you've accomplished?
I'm not going to say the book.
Yeah, good.
I think what I'm proud of is the journey that led to the book.
Ooh, I love that.
I think when I hit send the final time to the publisher, I broke down in tears because I realized this was a 10-year journey in the making that was culminating with this book. But I think the first thing I'm proud of is that I listened to my inner knowing. I left Wall Street and took the job at Andy Fisher from a place of deep intuitive knowing. And that was the yes that transformed the entire trajectory of my life. I could have stayed miserable. I could have stayed unfulfilled. I could have stayed in my addiction. I could have stayed in all the different things that came from playing the game and living in my mask. And it was the journey at Eileen Fisher that brought me into my own truth. That brought me to a place of self-acceptance and being comfortable living in my own skin. Walking into my fears and trying things that showed me who I really was. And so I think if I were to say one thing that I'm most proud of, it's saying yes and walking into the unknown.
Risk-taking in that authentic way. Love it. Okay, Sean, share your book title one more time for everyone, because this is going to air when it comes out. So we're going to drop the link in the show notes.
Wonderful. Warrior Compassion, Unleashing the Healing Power of Men.
Unleashing the Healing Power of Men. Thank you so much for being a guest on Create Magic at Work, and thank you for sending magic to everyone today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Do you have this feeling that you were called to do something very special and important in the world? Do you consciously tune into something higher than yourself for guidance and inspiration? Have you had mystical or spiritual experiences that have provided guidance in your everyday life and work? If you answered yes to those 3 questions, then you are a fit for a Create Magic at Work coaching program. If you're looking to explore new frontiers in your personal and professional life, I invite you to consider stepping into one of my coaching programs. I specialize in helping people step outside of their comfort zone and embrace the unknown. Whether you're looking to launch a new business venture, navigate a major life transition, or simply push yourself to reach new heights, I can help you achieve your goals. Please schedule a complimentary consultation with me at createmagicatwork.net. Click on Work with Amy, and I can't wait to see you. Sending magic to you. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming back every week to listen to a new episode of Create Magic at Work and really helping to support and advocate for healthy leaders, workplaces, and lives for all of us. If you want any information on how to connect with me, click on the link in the show notes. You'll get access to all of the social media links for Create Magic at Work. Stay following along for more amazing episodes where we help you improve productivity and profitability in the workplace and decrease stress. Sending magic to everyone, and see you next time.